There is always a moment when you feel your friendship turn. You're still laughing, still looping stories back and forth, but some part of you withdraws. The intimacy stays on the surface. You're showing up, but from a distance. You're known, but not seen. And if you are somehow seen, you're still empty. We tend to praise connection as a kind of cure. Loneliness, after all, has been likened to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Entire disciplines have emerged to study our need to belong. And researchers like Lorraine Besser are right to remind us that relationships, romantic, platonic, incidental, hold real weight in the human pursuit of happiness. According to Besser, these social bonds are essential, not optional. They make life livable. But we should ask what we're really staying alive for. It made me think of that line from the dead poets: society, medicine, law, business, engineering. These are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. We love this quote because it names something deeper than survival. But it also risks being misunderstood, because even poetry, beauty, romance, and love can be reduced to performance or sensation if they don't meet something solid inside us. It's true that connection can feel electric when it's good. It can feel like being salvaged, like someone has reached into the noise and chosen you. There's a kind of high to that, a sweetness, a lightness, a rush. But that's precisely the danger. The moment becomes a mirror, a thrill, a justification, and then eventually it fades. The high softens, the silence returns, and if you haven't yet met yourself in that silence, you will feel more alone than you did before, and ignore it until you forgot you did. Because connection can lift you, but it cannot hold you. It cannot give your life its depth unless that depth already exists. That's the difference between living a life that is animated from within and one that constantly waits for the next arrival, the next spark, the next confirmation. External warmth cannot replace internal fire. You must have your own rhythm, a poetry with yourself, a private cadence that connection may reflect but can never originate. I think of Ralph Waldo Emerson, writing not of friendship or love, but of the self. I am part or particle of God, he wrote, not in a religious sense, but in a metaphysical one. The self to him is not a thing to be fixed or filled in, but a current, divine and whole. And while Emerson didn't deny the importance of others, he insisted that everything begins with self-reverence. To be capable of love, you must first be capable of being alone. You must know your own edges. That's the piece I find missing from much of our discourse on connection, the premise that relationships are only as deep as the soil they're planted in. If you do not trust yourself, or admire yourself, or even know what it is you bring to the table, then the table becomes a mirror. A desperate mirror you insist upon to conjure up value. It might reflect, maybe even shine, but it will never fully satisfy. This isn't to dismiss Besser's research, which shows again and again how people report higher levels of well-being when surrounded by close, supportive relationships. But I wonder how often that happiness is confused with relief. Relief from solitude, from silence, from the harder questions we ask ourselves when no one else is listening. Because connection can also be diversion. You're surrounded by people who love you but don't challenge you. You belong, but not in a way that stretches the soul. We know how to perform intimacy before we've practiced introspection, and so we love from a place of need, not abundance. Anything built from need will rot to its core sooner or later, much as our bodies do. Emerson would argue that this is backwards. The journey inward must precede the journey outward, not because self is more important than others, but because it's the only place from which true presence can emerge. Nothing can bring you peace but yourself, he wrote. Not even the warmest companionship can compensate for an absence within. That's the paradox of modern intimacy. We're often too alienated for true closeness, yet too overstimulated for real solitude. We exist in a state of ambient contact, touching but not sinking in. Curated selves touching other curated selves. Even our joy can be performative. And yet we keep reaching. That reaching matters. It is not wrong to want to be loved or to find meaning in another's gaze, but I believe the real work begins in asking why we reach and what version of ourselves we offer when we do. I have come to believe that relationships are an extension of the self, not a remedy for its incompleteness. They can deepen what is already present, reflect what is already forming, echo what we already know. But they cannot build the foundation. That is work only we can do. Otherwise, the love we receive will feel borrowed or conditional and slightly misaligned. Somewhere, even in joy, we'll feel it, the quiet hum of something missing. Not because we lack connection, but because we haven't yet connected with ourselves. We have no idea how to. It's easy to believe we are happiest in the presence of others. Laughter can be the best medicine. Being touched can feel antiseptic. Even the humanity within the minutiae between two strangers. Lorraine Besser calls our attention to these moments. Shared experiences, she writes, that often stand out as our happiest. And it's true. In friendship, we borrow time from the world. We set aside deadlines and obligations, loosen the grip on our curated selves, and enter into something gentler, more felt. But the space we make with others can sometimes conceal the space we've abandoned within ourselves. Emerson worried about this, about the performance of constancy, the ways we fold ourselves into versions that can be recognized, accepted, and approved. The fear of judgment, he thought, was more dangerous than loneliness. It teaches us to speak less honestly, think less freely. Over time, we begin to withhold not just from others, but from ourselves. There is a particular grief in this, a quiet forfeiting of interior freedom, and yet it is so common, so socially rewarded that it often goes unnoticed. The warmth of friendship can blur into the safety of sameness. We keep showing up, but only in the roles we know will be received. So what happens when we unlearn the need to be consistent? Emerson imagined a life not anchored in fixed identity, but in the ability to respond to the world anew. Moments of introspection, he believed, allowed us to glimpse something truer, not just about ourselves, but about how we belong to the larger fabric of being. These weren't moments of withdrawal, they were moments of return. To live fluidly is not to reject relationships, but to meet it differently. It's to allow intimacy without surrendering selfhood. It's to understand that no friendship, no matter how attentive, can substitute for the deeper work of self-recognition. Without that grounding, even the most beautiful connections become weight-bearing. They carry our unmet needs, our deferred questions, our longing to be completed by someone else. But no one can complete us. That is not what love is for. A relationship born of desperation may pacify us, soothe us even, but it does not free us. And the most enduring intimacy is one that leaves room for solitude, for evolution, for contradiction. In that space, we do not ask others to carry the burden of our becoming. We simply ask them to witness it. So yes, we need each other, but not in the way we've been taught to think. We do not need others to save us from ourselves. We need them to remind us of what is already whole, and we, in turn, must do the same. There is a growing consensus, supported by psychology, reinforced by culture, that any interaction is better than none, a nod exchanged with a stranger, a passing word, the simple rhythm of being noticed. Besser leans into this belief, drawing from Sandstrom and Dunn's 2014 study, which found that even the most peripheral social encounters, those without closeness, history, or depth, can produce measurable increases in happiness. And yet, there is something faintly uneasy in this framing. It suggests that contact alone is enough, that the architecture of fulfillment can be built on fragments, on gestures that skim the surface but leave the interior untouched. Emerson offers a different vocabulary. The great man, he writes, is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. This is not a call to retreat from others, but to remain unblurred by them. What Emerson articulates is a discipline of self-possession, a way of moving through the world without absorbing its distortions. Where Besser sees value in proximity, Emerson insists on orientation. Happiness, he implies, is not simply a matter of who surrounds us, but of who we are when they do. Relationships do not begin with the other, they begin with the self that enters. And the self, if undeveloped, seeks not companionship, but validation. It enters the room not to connect, but to be filled. In that posture, even intimacy becomes a transaction, visibility mistaken for recognition, affirmation for care. Emerson again, the silent church before the service begins, better than any preaching. That silence, measured, expectant, not yet socialized, is where selfhood is most intact. Before communion, before doctrine, before the need to be understood. It is this pre-relational space that gives relationships their meaning. Without it, connection becomes noise, constant, comforting, but ultimately hollow. This is not to discredit Besser's claim that even minor social contact can lift us. It can, but lift is not the same as ground. And without grounding, the happiness we find in others merely suspends us. It does not hold. Fulfillment requires the capacity to stand alone. Only then can we choose connection without depending on it. Relationships formed from this clarity are not pure because they are perfect. They are pure because they are not compensatory. They are not a patch for an unattended self. They are extensions of it. The modern world confuses nearness with intimacy and visibility with meaning. But if one cannot sit inside the silent church of their own interior, before the roles, before the wanting, then no crowd, no warmth, no companion will quite resolve the disquiet beneath. Emerson understood what so many systems of wellness forget, that the presence of others without the presence of self is not peace, it is performance.